I never thought a vacation could end my marriage. My name is Daniel and I had planned a week-long getaway with my wife Sarah in the Florida Keys. It was supposed to be a chance to reconnect, to laugh, to leave the stress of work and daily routines behind. We had been married for 6 years, and despite some ups and downs, I believed our bond was strong. That belief would be tested in ways I never imagined. From the moment we arrived, something felt off. Sarah seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone, smiling at messages I didn't understand. I brushed it off at first, telling myself it was just work or friends. But as the days went on, I noticed subtle signs: her laughter with strangers, the way she avoided physical closeness, the sudden secrecy around her phone. It was a slow-burning alarm I couldn't ignore. On the third night of our trip, the truth hit me like a punch. While I was stepping out to grab a late-night snack, I noticed her texting someone repeatedly, and then deleting the messages. I froze. My heart pounded and my mind raced. This wasn't just distraction, it was betrayal. I returned to our room, pretending nothing had happened, but inside everything shifted. The vacation, the laughs, the sunsets, they all felt like a facade hiding the truth I had just discovered. I confronted her that night, carefully, trying to remain calm. "Sarah, who are you talking to?" I asked. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw guilt, fear, and something else, a flash of defiance. "It's nothing, Daniel. Don't worry about it," she said, her tone dismissive, almost casual. But I knew better. I had spent years learning to read people, not just their words but their actions. And her actions were screaming lies. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't beg. I would disappear. Not in anger, not in impulse, but as a calculated choice. I left our hotel room quietly, packed only what I needed, and drove to a nearby town where I could think, process, and plan. For the first time, I felt the cold clarity of detachment, the realization that sometimes the only way to confront betrayal is by removing yourself from the situation entirely. The next 48 hours were a haze of thought and planning. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't respond to messages. Every notification from her phone felt like a knife in the back. And yet, in that silence, I found control, a rare, sharp sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years. I began drafting what would be my ultimate statement of truth: the divorce papers. During those 2 days away, I replayed every moment of the trip in my mind. The subtle glances, the secretive messages, the sudden excuses. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth: Sarah had cheated. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about her actions. It was about how I had been treated, the betrayal of trust that had been building quietly over time. I planned my return carefully. This wasn't about confrontation or arguments. It was about clarity, justice, and delivering the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. I returned to our hotel late at night, carrying a folder of divorce papers, my mind sharp and unwavering. The lobby was quiet, the perfect setting for what I intended. I didn't storm into the room. I didn't shout. I simply waited, knowing she would return. When Sarah came back, I could see the surprise and confusion on her face. "Daniel, where have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I handed her the folder without a word. The look on her face changed in an instant: shock, fear, disbelief. What is this?" she stammered, flipping through the papers. I watched her closely, calm and collected, letting the silence do the work that anger never could. "This," I finally said, "is the consequence of betrayal. Actions have consequences, and trust broken like this cannot simply be repaired with apologies or excuses." She tried to interrupt, to argue, to explain, but I raised a hand and shook my head. There would be no justification. Not tonight. Not ever. The following moments were tense. She pleaded, she begged, she tried to reason, but I didn't move. I didn't engage in the drama. Instead, I let her see the reality of her choices. This wasn't just about a vacation. It was about a foundation shattered, a trust destroyed, and a marriage that could no longer survive lies. Each second of her disbelief reinforced the truth I already knew. My actions were necessary. My silence was stronger than any argument. Then, as the night grew darker, the weight of what had happened began to settle in her eyes. She realized, too late, that the life she had taken for granted, the love, the stability, the partnership, was slipping through her fingers. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply let the reality speak for itself. And as she looked at the divorce papers, finally understanding the magnitude of her actions, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I had taken control of my life, and sorrow for the relationship that could have been, had honesty and loyalty prevailed. In those quiet moments, I understood something essential. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is not confrontation, not anger, but decisive action. Walking away, letting consequences unfold, and returning with clarity. These are the tools that reveal the truth far more effectively than any argument could. And in that truth, I found a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, the aftermath became unavoidable. Sarah was quiet, withdrawn, and for the first time, fully aware of the consequences of her choices. She tried to discuss things to salvage pieces of our marriage, but I remained firm. I had realized something vital. Love without trust is a hollow shell, and no amount of excuses could fill it. Over the next week, I handled the practicalities, returning home, notifying friends and family when necessary, and beginning the process of legal separation. Throughout it all, I kept a measured approach. There was no need for dramatic outbursts or public humiliation. The divorce papers were enough. They conveyed clarity, accountability, and the reality that actions have consequences. As days turned into weeks, I noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor. Sarah tried to act as though things could return to normal, but I was no longer the same man she had known. The man who once trusted blindly, who sought reconciliation through patience and compromise, had been replaced by someone who understood that self-respect and boundaries are paramount. The trip, the betrayal, and the decisive action I took had changed the dynamics irrevocably. I also reflected on myself. I realized that in relationships, trust is the most fragile currency. When it's broken, no apology or charm can restore its full value. The vacation had been an eye-opener, not just about Sarah, but about the limits of tolerance, the necessity of self-worth, and the importance of clear boundaries. My disappearance and return with the divorce papers were not acts of vengeance. They were acts of clarity, defining what behavior I would no longer accept. Months later, I found peace. The initial sting of betrayal faded, replaced by a sense of empowerment. I rebuilt my life deliberately, focusing on work, friendships, and personal growth. I understood now that love should never come at the cost of self-respect, and that decisive action in the face of deception is sometimes the only path to true freedom. Looking back, the vacation was never just a getaway, it was a turning point. It revealed hidden truths, tested my patience, and ultimately reaffirmed the principles that guide me: honesty, accountability, and unwavering self-respect. Sarah's choices were her own, and my response was mine. By stepping away, observing, and returning with clarity, I had reclaimed my life and defined the boundaries of my own happiness. And as I moved forward, I knew one thing with certainty: betrayal is a test of character, and how you respond to it determines the rest of your life. In that truth, I found strength, closure, and the freedom to begin again.